It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a nigga on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.
Good evening, everybody. You're watching America First. My name is Nicholas J. Fuentes. We have a great show for you tonight. Is today Tuesday? Today's Wednesday. Very excited to be back here with you tonight on Wednesday. We have a lot to talk about tonight. Lots to get into. Big show. Our featured story, we are once again watching the imminent war in Iran. And we covered this last night. But we're going to give you some updates on what has been going on. And it's not looking good. I analyzed this a little bit last night. And we've been talking about this basically since the first U.S. strikes against Iran last June. But the difference is that now we actually have the force package in place. And so I'm sure you've seen this on Twitter. There's been even some rumors on 4chan, as always. But we now have, and this is official from Wall Street Journal, New York Times, we now have the largest force assembled off the coast of Iran in the Middle East since the invasion of Iraq in 2003. We're talking about 2 aircraft carriers, over a dozen missile destroyers. We're talking about many squadrons of attack aircraft, fighter jets, strike aircraft. And I think it is basically a certainty that something is going to happen imminently. And that is really the big question. Is it going to be something? Is it going to be nothing? I think we can establish at this point, as of today, that yes, something is going to happen. People say nothing ever happens. I think this time we're going to get something. Now, the big question is, what is that actually going to be? Of course, up to this point, it's been a question of whether the United States will act. We declined to intervene in Iran during the protest in January. But now that we have forward deployed 2 aircraft carriers, dozens of attack aircraft, now the question is, well, what is it going to look like? What's it actually going to be when we make the move? And it seems like all signs are pointing towards a weeks-long air campaign. We talked a little bit about this last night, but it's looking very likely like it will not be a ground operation, doesn't look like special forces. It may not even be what Trump has been requesting, which is a decisive confrontation. It's not going to be a once and for all strike that's going to topple the regime. But it does look like at the minimum, it is going to be a weeks-long, maybe multiple weeks-long attack in order to degrade Iran's nuclear capability and its missile capability. And it seems like this can happen at any point in the next few days. And maybe you could say at the furthest extent, it will happen within 2 weeks. That looks like roughly the timeline right now. And we're going to talk tonight all about why that is. We'll talk about the kind of force package that has been assembled, because the type of force and the amount of force is indicative of how they're going to use it. We were able to predict a little bit of what happened in Venezuela based on the number of personnel that were involved and the number of warships. And I think that similarly, we can look at the force package in the Middle East and we can make some educated guesses about what they are actually there to do and what the plan is. And then therefore, based on that, if we can determine what kind of strike it will be and the scope and scale of it, we can figure out what the Trump administration's end game is. What is the actual goal here? Because that seems to be shrouded in a little bit of uncertainty as well. So we're going to talk all about that tonight. We're going to break it down. We're going to look at the numbers. We're going to look at the types of weapons in place, like I said, and we will be making some informed guesses about the timeline, about the goal, and about the mode. How's it going to play out? That'll be our main story. We're also going to look tonight at an editorial in the Wall Street Journal, which I saw tonight. Kind of a slow news day, so there's not too much going on, but I do think this is really worthy of consideration because this absolutely vindicates what I predicted about deportations a couple of years ago. And so I'm reading the Wall Street Journal today, and there's a editorial, there's an opinion piece, and it's talking about mass deportations. And we've been talking a lot about the mass deportations. We've talked about how they are not really even happening to begin with. But the mass deportations that are not happening are also grinding to a halt. Go figure. No mass deportations, and yet they are also simultaneously grinding to a screeching halt. And we witnessed this with the withdrawal from Minneapolis and the apparent change in policy from the White House, which is that they're no longer even calling it that. They're now talking about removing all of the criminal illegal aliens. Crossing into the country illegally is a crime. I guess they mean people that have committed crimes on top of that. So you cross into the country illegally, you're fine, but only if you commit a violent rape or a murder, well, now you're going to be deported. This is an Obama-era policy, but this has now taken the place of mass deportations. In any case, we have talked about the pushback from the media. We have talked about the pressure from the Republicans, actually, from the Republican Party and from the conference in Congress because of the upcoming midterms. We talked about the government shutdown on Monday. But here's the angle that a lot of people are not focusing on. It is the economic angle. Where is the real pressure coming from against mass deportations? It's an open secret. The real pressure against mass deportations is coming from the Chamber of Commerce. It is coming from the business interests. It is coming from Wall Street. And I said this in 2024. The strongest evidence, or maybe the strongest predictor of whether you will get deportations actually has nothing to do with any of the rhetoric surrounding the deportations. People talk about whether it's humane and whether it's cruel. People talk about whether it's feasible or whether it's impractical. But the number one indicator, the number one predictor, how you knew you were not going to get deportations is because of the effect on the economy. Because of the effect on spending, on labor, on wages, and ultimately then on the effect on profits for Wall Street. And so I said back in 2024, the reason you're not going to get mass deportations is because the big businesses don't want this to happen. The big businesses employ the illegal immigrants, and those illegal immigrants spend their money, which keeps the big businesses going. Big business profits from illegal immigration, to put it succinctly. And so there's a big editorial in the Wall Street Journal that says, do not do mass deportations. Why? Because it will hurt the economy. And so we'll read through this editorial. This spells it out as simply as it can possibly be said. And a lot of people think about politics and talk about politics. And for a lot of people, this is based on sentiment and this is based on vibes. I remember in the beginning of 2025, people were having this discussion. Will there be mass deportations? Do you think Trump is going to do it? And people said, I don't know. I think he will. I think he won't. Maybe. I feel like he's going to do it. And this gets to the structural analysis of how power works in the country. We've been talking about this. You need to understand the anatomy of our power structure, where the true seat of power resides. And once you begin to understand this, once you begin to think about that category, that subject, you realize how silly it is to talk with all these other kinds of words and phrases and sentiment. People say, I think Trump wants to do mass deportations. These kinds of words don't actually have any meaning. I think he's gonna. I think he won't. I think he wants it. Stephen Miller is autistically fixated on deportations. This is not political science. This is not actually doing anything. When we consider political outcomes, we have to think about the political actors involved and their incentives. And so we'll get into a little bit of that tonight, and we'll talk about this editorial. But it's going to be a good show. Good to be back with you here on Ash Wednesday. Before we get into the news, I want to remind you to smash the follow button on Rumble, smash a like button, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the show. Remember to check out our merch store at Fuentes.store. We have hats, sweatshirts, t-shirts. We got the Epstein quarter zip still. We're probably going to get rid of it soon. Not because of any pressure or anything like that, but I don't know. I feel like it's going out of season. So get it while you can. Epstein quarter zip. You heard it here first. Limited time only. Epstein quarter zip, Fuentes.store. Check it out. Become a Plus subscriber. If you really love the show, you want to support it. So many people are obsessed with the show and they're subscribed on Rumble, but they're not subscribed on the website. Well, what the kind of fan are you? You watch this show for free every night. You tune in, you demand more content, more energy, more topics, more stuff. Hey, well, when are you going to chip in? You want to be a super fan? Go to AmericaFirst.plus. $15 a month. It's only $15 a month. That's not a lot of money. How much is Netflix? How much are you paying the Jews at Netflix? $15 a month just to keep the lights on over here. Okay, just for our Lenten fast, just for the fish sandwiches, pepper and egg sandwiches. Doesn't grow on trees around here. AmericaFirst.plus, $15 a month, you get the archive. $100 a month, you get to be in the group chat. That's for the high rollers. That's for the rich people. I don't want to see any mouth-breathing, impoverished people. I don't want to see unemployed people. $100 a month, and you get to be in the group chat with me. All the high rollers and the big. And I was in there all day today dropping voice messages. I was talking about a lot of different stuff in there today. I'm always in there. So anybody will tell you the testimonials are very positive. I'm basically doing a second show for the rich. It's the most rewarding work that I do. You know, I do this show and it's okay, but really the most rewarding and fulfilling work that I do is when I do the show for the rich. Because I know they appreciate it more because they're smarter. But that's AmericaFirst.plus. We're going to get into it. We're going to dive into it. There's not too much. Usually I like to stall a little bit and procrastinate, but there's literally nothing else going on. I don't think there's even one other thing going on in the news to even talk about other than the situation with Iran. Here's what I will say. Okay, here's one thing that I just remembered. What is absolutely amazing and truly shocking, I guess I shouldn't be surprised or shocked by anything at this point, but you have to think about where we are, and we're going to get into this a little bit later. But like I said, tonight, we're going to get into this military buildup in Iran. We'll get to all the details. Consider where we are, though. Take a step back and think about it. We are on our way to bombing Iran a second time. I can't get over this. I feel like everybody has accepted it. I feel like everybody looks at the situation and just says, yeah, I guess that's just where we are now. I really still have a hard time getting over it. Because if you are an OG Trump supporter, if you were there in 2015, 2016, if you were there for the original MAGA America First, opposing the Iraq war was like one of the central planks. That was like one of the number one staples of the MAGA movement. That is the basis upon which Trump was attacking Jeb Bush, who was at one time the front runner for the Republican nomination a long time ago. And so it's truly amazing that 10 years later, on the other side of all of these battles, this struggle, it is truly unthinkable that we are now literally repeating the exact same thing. We talked about it a little bit last night. What was the war in Iraq? Well, for starters, it was a war for Israel. This is one of Israel's enemies, not really a major enemy of ours. At least they don't threaten us. It was, not only that, a regime change war. And these are very messy because you change the regime, and if you don't have a replacement government, then you break it, you buy it. You either have to come in and stabilize the country, and that's very expensive and time-consuming and deadly. Otherwise, you get a failed state like Libya, and you're back to square one. It becomes a springboard for terrorism, like was the case with ISIS. So it's a regime change war, and this has a very bad track record throughout history. Thirdly, and this is maybe the richest part of it, it was sold to us under the false pretext about weapons of mass destruction. Remember? They said it's nuclear weapons. That's why it's urgent. We have to intervene. And this is literally the exact same thing. It's a war for Israel against a country that does not threaten us. It's a regime change war. This one way more ambitious, actually. Way more ambitious. Iran is geographically bigger, more populous, bigger military, stronger government. It's a much bigger undertaking in literally every quantifiable way. And once again, it's literally the same story. It's actually the exact same story, which is they're killing their own people. They have a weapons of mass destruction program. They're this tyrannical pariah state in the Middle East. It's the exact same story, and it's truly amazing. Now, here's the point. I'm not just restating what I said last night. What's truly remarkable is that in spite of this should be as cut and dry and open and shut and black and white as it could possibly be. In 2015, Trump said the war in Iraq was a mistake. They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There weren't any. We spent all this money. We don't even have it. But like that was the story in 15. Now he's doing the exact same thing. He's doing the opposite of that. The literal opposite, as I've just demonstrated. The war which he once criticized, he's now selling. Now here's the amazing thing. As black and white as this is, you still have, and I have seen it on my timeline all week, hundreds, if not thousands, of pro-Trump shills on Twitter that are supporting this. How is it possible? I tweeted this today. I said, if we get a war with Iran, forget it. I'm not voting in 26. I'm not voting for any member of this cabinet in 28, and nobody else should either. Why would we vote for the party that brings us Iraq 2? Not only is that a stupid idea, but it's also actually a complete betrayal of what this entire movement is about. So I put on Twitter today, I said, if we get this second Iran strike, if we're in a war with Iran, what's even the proposition? Just forget it. I won't vote for it. I won't vote for it in the midterms. I'm not going to vote for the vice president and secretary of state that have given this to us. And that's what they want the ticket to be, is Vance and Rubio. War in Iran brought to you by Vance and Rubio. Now get on board and vote for them in 28. So I put this on Twitter and literally go look at my replies. Go look at the replies, look at the top replies by likes, look at the quote tweets, and there are no shortage of pro-Trump accounts, some of them boomers, some of them even Zoomers, and they're saying, well, you know, I trust Trump. One guy says, I voted for Trump to put America first. If he thinks we should go to war with Iran, then we should go to war with Iran. This is the discourse. This is what's being said. This is what I see in my replies. You're a Democrat plant. How could you say that? And this vindicates what I said about Trump in 24. Herein lies the problem with the Trump victory. And I will keep saying this because it is true. The problem with Trump at this point is that whatever he does, no matter what it is, a significant percentage of middle American radicals will support it. Maybe most of them, maybe all of them. It doesn't matter what Trump does, what he says. It could be a complete betrayal of his own promises, of his own movement, of everything. It doesn't matter. Cover up the Epstein files. Go to war with Iran. Give up on mass deportations. 70% of the GOP base will defend it because it's him. That's the danger. And suddenly you go from a country which is primed to be radicalized. It's primed for right-wing populism. It's primed for an America First movement. And all of a sudden, now that Trump is thrust into the White House, now all of that revolutionary fervor is deflated. If Trump is doing it, they will eat it up. And that would not be true in the alternative case. And what I mean by that is, had Kamala won, let's say for the sake of example, she would be bringing us to war in Iran as well, without a doubt. The Israelis would be pushing her. The same interests would be pushing her. But if Kamala was bringing us to war in Iran, would any Republican support it? Not even Trump would support it. Not even Trump himself would support it. Trump would be on Truth Social, or I guess he would be in prison, but Trump would be against it. 100% of Republicans would be against it. Certainly, National Review would be cheering it on. They would say, today is the day Kamala became the president, when she bombed Iran. But you know that the right-wing populists, the majority of them, almost to a man, would be saying, wow, this is the deep state. This is the Clinton-Kamala machine. They just want endless wars. If she didn't release the Epstein files, they would be outraged. It'd be MAGA night at the White House. And that is the difference. Now, hear me out here. A lot of people are going to watch this clip, mark my words, and they're going to say, wow, he wanted Kamala to win. This guy's a Democrat. He can't let it go. He seriously thinks Kamala should have won. There would have been 3 million more illegals here by now. People are going to say that. The reason I am telling you this, and by the way, you know this is a fact. However this makes you feel, whatever the implications of this might be, you know this is a fact. What I am telling you is a fact. That much is indisputable. If Trump pushes something, 80% of Republicans will support it no matter what it is, even if it's a war with Iran. If Kamala did the exact same thing, 80% of Republicans would be against it. That is a fact. You cannot dispute this. When Trump brings us to war in Iran, as he did last June, 80% Republicans supported it. If Biden or Harris did it, they would be against it. You may not like the implications of this. It might make you uncomfortable. But that is true. And what does that tell you? It tells you something about the psychology and the game theory of voting for Republicans. We have this idea in our heads that we have to vote for the least bad option. We have to vote for the better option. You're given two choices. We have to vote for the one that is the least bad, and that's always the right play. The Democrats are going to be measurably worse, so we got to vote for the alternative because there's only two choices. But this is actually a lie, because time actually goes on after the election. And so you might think, well, we have a choice of Republican and Democrat in this election, and who are you with? And you might say, well, I don't like either of them. And people are going to say, well, that's a vote for the other side. But time goes on. Somebody gets elected, and then there are second-order consequences. You see? There are actually many permutations. There are trees of possibilities. You understand? So it's not just we get one or the other. Whether we get one or the other and how we get one or the other actually has ramifications. There are reactions to this. There are other dominoes that fall. Here's the point. If in every single cycle you say, oh, well, hold our nose, vote for the lesser two evils. Oh, well, vote for the lesser. Oh, well, vote for the least bad option. If you do that every time, you're never going to get anything different. But if one time you say, I'm not going to vote for that, and then Kamala has the bad war with Iran, she has to cover up the Epstein files, whatever, then maybe it changes the outcome of what type of option you get on the right, what the offering will be in the next cycle. You see? So that all of this is to say, if you're voting for something that is against your interest, how does that take us to a place where we ever get what we want? If Trump is telling us we're going to war with Iran and we vote for this and we affirm this and we reward this, then what do you think we're going to get 4 years from then? Well, we're not going to be happy. And what do you think happens when we vote for that? Again, what do you think will happen 4 years from that point? You're not going to be happy again. And this is the game that we play every 2 years, every 4 years, by rewarding this, by incentivizing this, by affirming this. You're going to get more of it. And this is the issue that Trump creates. It's that the GOP, I said this the other night, they're sucking all the resources, support as the rallying point for opposition to the left, or under Trump, as the rallying point for populist opposition to the entire establishment. It is preventing any other option from coming to the fore. And in some ways, you could say it's actually re-entrenching the establishment, because now that Trump is in office, now people support this stuff. If Kamala had won the election, let's say some things that we know to be true. No Republican would think it was a fair election. Actually, most Americans would say that Kamala has no legitimacy because she never even won a primary on the Democrat side. She would be stuck with the crisis in the Middle East, the crisis in Ukraine, an economic catastrophe. Like, all of this is true. And in 2028, who knows what could have happened? We just don't know. It's a big question mark. But here's what we do know now. Now that Trump is in office and he's doing all these things, war in Iran, covering up the Epstein files, a lot of Republicans are going to support it. He's deeply unpopular with the majority of the country. They're blaming all of this on him, and now he has soured immigration enforcement for everybody. He's pissed off the left, alienated the middle, and in 2028, the initiative's going to be with the other side. Like, this is how you got to think about these things. So I see these young people on Twitter, and they're saying, well, Trump is supporting war in Iran, so I support it too. And I'm thinking, this is maybe the entire conceit of MAGA. MAGA is a handshake between the establishment and the rubes. What happened to us? What happened to you guys? In 2016, we were going to burn it all down. In 2016, we were saying, we need an outsider, we need a businessman, we need someone that's going to destroy the establishment of both parties, the globalists, the banks, the special interests. What the fuck happened? Here we are 10 years later, and the logic of Trump Republicans is vote for every Republican no matter what. Vote for Lindsey Graham, vote for Kevin McCarthy, vote for Ronna McDaniel, vote for the RNC, vote for war in Iran. We don't care if we build a wall or have mass deportations. The entire conceit of MAGA was to get a nation of people that were ready to revolt and get them back onto the plantation. A nation of people that were unreasonable, thought the elections were rigged, thought they were being screwed by free trade, mass immigration, foreign wars. They were ready to burn it all down and get them back onto the plantation, being dutiful Republican voters and accepting all the compromises that came with that. And that's actually a perfect segue into our first story, which is about this editorial from the Wall Street Journal. And like I said, I'm reading the Journal today. And for those that don't know, the Wall Street Journal is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who is a super Zionist and a spook. He got his citizenship from the Reagan administration, working with the intelligence agencies, building satellites, owner of Fox News, New York Post, friend of Netanyahu. And his paper, Wall Street Journal, is like the mouthpiece of the Chamber of Commerce, of the business interest. And there's a very interesting article today in the Wall Street Journal. It's an editorial, and it talks about the mass deportations. And like I said at the top of the show, there has been so much said about mass deportations from a cultural and political lens. When we think about immigration, what we really think about is a cultural social issue. We think about a largely white majority, an increasingly small white majority, that is frustrated with the influx of immigrants who have a different culture, speak a different language, have created this underclass lifestyle where they're dependent on welfare, where they never assimilate, and where they're actually changing the texture of life of most cities in America because of these ethnic enclaves they're creating. They're browning America. And this is how we typically think about it. And so when we think about illegal immigration, we think about issues of society. Should these people stay in our country? Are they contributing? Are they good people? Are they real Americans? What does it mean to be American? Aren't we all immigrants? And what does it mean to be an immigrant? What's the difference between a settler and an economic migrant? These are the types of conversations that we have. And then there's also a political conversation. Well, they're all going to vote Democrat. And the Democrats want to amnesty them because they're a fixture of the Democrat machine politics. And people say the Democrats are the party of the marginalized and the racial and ethnic minorities and so on and so forth. And we've talked about these angles throughout the past year. We've talked about the pushback from the radical left, how they're fighting ICE. We've talked about how the Democrat Party shielded the immigrants. We have talked about how the Democrats are resisting this legislatively, how their allies in the media are putting the pressure on the administration, how Republicans don't like that the issues in the media because of the midterms. But this is the angle which is actually the most important aspect, and it is also the one that is never talked about. Now, for context, 2 years ago, I predicted that mass deportations would not happen. It's why I didn't vote for Trump. And you can go back, all these shows are on Rumble. You can go back and watch my show from 2024, 2 years ago. And I said explicitly, I will not vote for Trump because the mass deportations are never going to happen. And I knew it for a fact. And I was confident. Why was I confident? How did I know it? Well, I said it back then. It's not just about me. It's about the ironclad logic of these kinds of factors here. The reason why is because 2 years ago I said, during this election in 2024, what is the central determining factor of the success of the Democrats, or the Republicans for that matter? It's the economy. How well the incumbent party does in the election is dependent on how good the economy is doing. And what is happening in the economy in 2024? Inflation. Prices are going up. They're going up because of all the money printing. They're going up because of supply chain disruptions. They're going up for a variety of reasons. Inflation is high. That is one of the number one quantitative metrics to predict which party is going to win the election. Now, the Republicans are promising mass deportations. People are saying they're going to win the election because they're promising mass deportations. I said in 24, the reason you're not going to get mass deportations is because if you deport 10 million people, which is how many people came in under Joe Biden, what kind of impact do you think that will have on the economy? Just think about it. 10 million human beings. That is like if all the illegal immigrants in America, which is 30 million people, if all those people were removed, that would be like if Texas broke off from America and suddenly wasn't counted in the GDP, like Texas or Florida. If you deported even 10 million, that would be like if you took Chicago and its entire metropolitan area and you subtracted that from the U.S. economy, its GDP. What would that do to the GDP numbers? What would that do to the rest of the macroeconomic metrics? Well, let's say very simply, in the first place, you remove 10 million people, that is 10 million fewer consumers. That's 10 million fewer people that are spending money on clothes, on food, on gas, on cars, on energy, on rent, on healthcare, on education, all of these things. 10 million fewer consumers. That's a huge hit. Well, what else do these 10 million people do? Many of them work. Many of them have jobs. 10 million people that are being employed under the table for low wages in construction, hospitality, food delivery, all these kinds of things that are now going to have to be replaced. Replaced by native-born workers that are going to want benefits, healthcare, minimum wage. So what does that do to labor cost? It makes it go up. You have a huge disruption. The illegals go out. Oh no, we got to find their replacements. There's a period of adjustment. And when they find their native-born replacements, the labor cost goes up. Cost goes up. You either have to increase prices, hello, inflation, or profits go down. And profits for who? Businesses, Wall Street, the corporations that employ them. Suffice to say, you deport 10 million people, it is going to slow down the economy and it is going to increase prices. Now, you're Donald Trump in the White House. You got elected to get inflation under control. That's why Biden, or ostensibly Kamala Harris, that's why the Democrats lost the election. Because prices were going up, inflation was high, stagflation was setting in, so they get killed politically over this. Trump gets into office, he needs to bring prices down. If you're a politician, this is your imperative. You want to win in 26? You want to win in 28? You got to get the prices down or stabilize them. You got to fix the economy, because if you don't, the bottom falls out from under you. If you don't fix the economy, you get a blue tsunami, and then you get impeached, and then you lose in 28. So these are the ironclad laws of politics. It's the economy, stupid. If you want to win the election, you got to have a good economy. If you want to have a good economy, you got to have growth. You got to have price stability. Inflation has to hit that target of 2%. And in this particular time of persistently high inflation, structural inflation, this is all the more important. Now factor in some other things. What else is Trump promising to do in 2024? He's promising a tariff schedule of 15% tariffs on all goods coming into the country. Now, I'm a tariff supporter, and I don't believe that tariffs are necessarily a direct tax on consumers. However, some of the cost of the tariff is ultimately borne by the consumer. Not all of it, and I think it's worth it, but some of it is. Some of the cost of the tariff is ultimately passed down. So that's already putting upward pressure on prices. Now you're going to deport 10 million people on top of that. Now you're going to deport 10 million consumers, 10 million workers, 10 million people that are employed under the table in some of these very important fields: agriculture, construction, food service, hospitality. I don't think so. Which is Trump going to choose? Deporting 10 million people, which is so politically costly, logistically not feasible for the government, would be unprecedented in terms of the effort required to do it, and it's going to destroy the economy and they get wiped in the midterms and they get wiped in 28? Or is Trump going to gesture that he's doing deportations, performatively target the criminals, of which there are only 700,000 criminal illegal aliens, people that are already a drain on society, and say that they did mass deportations. And meanwhile, they don't fuck with the illegal immigrants that are actually working. They don't mess with those good illegals that have been here for 20 years, that are contributing to society, that are bolstering the profits of Wall Street. Well, now we have our answer. So 2025, they deport 230,000 people. It's nothing. 2026, Trump has changed the policy. He says, well, we're only going after criminal illegals. And specifically, what have they done? They have made carve-outs for the illegals with jobs. When Trump passed the big, beautiful bill last year, him and Stephen Miller and Brooke Rollins at Agriculture were devising a plan to give hundreds of thousands of H-2A visas for illegal immigrants working on farms. It was effectively an amnesty. Go look it up. This was a negotiation. They were talking about taking all these illegal immigrants working in agriculture, Rollins is Secretary of Agriculture, and they were going to grandfather them in and effectively say, well, you're here already, you're working on the farms, we're going to give you a seasonal work visa to work on the farms. And they were going to give this big carve out and shield those people from deportation, an effective amnesty. Now in 2026, I hear word from the administration, from inside, that they are not going to do job site raids for companies with more than 50 employees. When Trump went into a Hyundai factory in Georgia and they deported 300 South Koreans, Trump himself called the governor and apologized and said he wouldn't do it again. They're making carve-outs for illegal aliens. It's not zero tolerance. It's not mass deportations. They're protecting the labor. Well, now here we are, 2026. I'm going to read to you. This is an editorial from the Wall Street Journal. This is a conservative paper of record, Murdoch-owned. This is Rupert Murdoch-owned, allied with the administration, mouthpiece for the business interest. This is what Wall Street Journal has to say. It says, quote, America's strength rests on sustained capital investment, but also on a growing supply of labor. More workers means more production, consumers, and demand. Doesn't that sound great? That's what I wake up and am concerned about. I want America to just constantly have more workers, more consumption, more aggregate demand. It's never enough. And if we don't have enough white workers, let's bring in Mexican workers. Oh, not enough Mexican workers, or they're too stupid? More Chinese workers, more African workers, more refugees. And we're all going to live together, increasing aggregate demand, buying products forever. Then we're going to go to the moon and we're going to go to Mars. Hopefully we can colonize the stars so that we can increase aggregate demand even more. I imagine a scenario where we encounter extraterrestrial life and they can also consume products and contribute to the gross domestic product. We can only hope that we can actually expand, put people on other planetary bodies. There will be more production, consumption, and demand. But anyway, so this is how it starts. It says the Trump administration's mass deportations threaten to break that virtuous cycle. Okay? It's almost beyond parody. Let me read that again. America's strength rests on its growing supply of labor. More workers means more production, consumers, and demand. The Trump administration's mass deportations threaten to break that virtuous circle. Not a vicious cycle of just constantly growing, constantly expanding the economy. No, this is a virtuous cycle of importing foreign workers to increase production and consumption and the GDP. It's a virtuous cycle that is good. It goes on. The U.S. was already slowly approaching zero labor force growth as fertility fell and the population aged. So this is an economic problem, right? People aren't getting married and having kids. And my first concern is, well, who's going to man the factories? Man, when I think about the travesty of men and women being alienated from one another, not pair bonding, not entering the sacrament of marriage and having children, our society is dying because it's devoid of love and connection and ultimately tradition and holiness. Yeah, but so who's going to man the factories? If men and women aren't getting married and having lots of kids and we don't have a ton of kids, so who's going to make the stuff? Who's going to be insurance agents? Who is going to man the gift shops? Who's going to make the missiles? Who's going to make the Stinger missiles for Ukraine if we don't have kids? This is a big problem. It says, what kept the country from this demographic disaster was immigration. The 3,000 person per day arrest quota for immigration enforcement looks like an act of economic self-sabotage. In other words, we're not having kids to man the factories. We need immigrants to make up the difference. If you start deporting illegals, we're sabotaging this plan. It says, which is, sort of the point, actually. Research from the Center for Migration Studies finds that the undocumented workforce in the United States is large and overwhelmingly employed across key sectors of the economy. Many of the 675,000 immigrants deported last year, that's a fake number, by the way, were working to build data centers, manufacturing plants, energy infrastructure, and housing. Who will take their place when the U.S. has 6 million unfilled jobs? Who will build the data centers, guys? You thought we were going to deport 30 million illegals, but wait, who's going to build the data centers so that we can have more chat GPT prompts? Who's going to build the houses for all the illegal immigrants without the illegal immigrants? Have you even thought of that? I know everybody was excited about mass deportations. Who's going to build the multifamily housing for all these immigrants if we don't have immigrant labor? Who's going to build the data centers? It goes on. Deportations impose costs on citizens too. The Peterson Institute for International Economics projected in 2024 that deporting 1.3 million workers could raise consumer prices by 1.5% within 3 years as labor shortages worsen. Deportations lead to the loss of jobs for citizens, according to the Hamilton Project. Consumption declines. The Brookings Institute estimates that the U.S. lost between $40 and $60 billion in consumer spending because of deportations. And that slows economic growth. There it is. I mean, you didn't think of this. Deport 10 million Venezuelans. Think of the hit to the GDP. As a businessman, a taxpayer, and an American with roots in this country that go back 400 years, I want to see us keep growing as we have for the past 250 years. I believe the vast majority of Americans feel the same way. The question we need to ask is, what is the ROI on our investment in ICE? This is the part that nobody wants to talk about. It is all about the economics. That's really what it is. At the end of the day, why is it that we need to bring in millions and millions and millions of immigrants? Well, you don't even really need to ask this and wonder aloud because it's a testable hypothesis. When did immigration increase the most? 1990. It was the 1990 Immigration Act under George Bush, which basically doubled every category of immigration. Green cards, chain migration, it created H-1B, it created these visa programs, the visa lottery. Everybody knows about the 65 Hart-Celler Act. It was the 1990 Immigration Act, which actually increased the quotas, increased the limit of how many legal immigrants could arrive. And who gave us the 1990 Immigration Act? George Bush, a Republican. President George Bush gave us the 1990 Immigration Act. Chain migration, Republicans. Visa lottery, Republicans. H-1Bs, Republicans. They invented it. And who lobbied for the 1990 Immigration Act? The Chamber of Commerce, of course. The Chamber of Commerce, representing the business interests. Because they, on Wall Street, are measuring the macroeconomic trends. They're measuring the collapsing fertility rate. They're measuring the trend in terms of population growth and the future workforce and the size of people which will be beneficiaries of the government, retirees, dependents, as opposed to productive people. And so they lobbied for us to accept more Hispanics, more Asians, to do these jobs that Americans could not do because there's not enough of us, because we're not being born. And this is why then the propaganda was created. There's all sorts of political interest behind it as well, But this is just the narrative that serves as the pretext. America's going to become a big and welcoming country, and we are a nation of immigrants, and the American dream is for everybody, and the blessings of liberty were secured not just for white men, but for people from anywhere. Why was this mythology created? So that white people would get comfortable with their replacements. White people would get comfortable with the economic migrants pouring in from the countries that still have a high fertility rate, who are going to replace the children that white people never had and we're not going to have. And what is the incentive to bring these people in? It's literally just a math equation. If you're a business and you're making things or selling a service, what's your number one cost? You got to pay rent on your factory, on your farm, or whatever. You got to pay for the land usage. You got to pay for your taxes. You got to pay for your capital, your machinery, your equipment. But probably your biggest cost is your labor. It's the people that are working there. If you're running a farm, it's the people that are picking the grapes, picking the berries. If you're running a hotel, it's the people that are turning over the rooms, turning over the beds and the bathrooms. If you're a construction company, it's the people that are hammering the nails, that are doing the work. So they want immigrants to come over here and work as cheaply as possible. Immigrants that are going to come here, and because they are not actually citizens, or in some cases they are, but there's another way in which the workers are dependent on their employers, like in the case of H-1Bs, they want people that are going to come over and, in a word, accept a lower quality of life. Lower wages, becoming an underclass, dependent on government to subsidize their lifestyle with some small wages. And if you could get that cost down with a constantly increasing supply of labor and people that are working basically without regulation, you keep that cost as low as possible, and that means your profits can go up. If the cost goes down, the profits go up. The revenue is fixed. If you can get the cost down, you get to keep more of what you bring in. It's that simple. And so Wall Street, which buys and sells the companies, and the companies which are becoming conglomerates and highly centralized, well, it is in their economic interest to have this endless supply of labor. As a distinct class, the people that own the businesses, whether they're running the businesses themselves or they just own the stocks or they're the asset managers, they want to keep the supply of labor flowing so that profits go up, so that their assets appreciate in value and they get richer. And those are your billionaires. Those are your billionaire class. That is your billionaire corporate business owning class, which is subsidizing the Republican Party. And at the end of the day, that is the dirty little secret of the GOP. Let me put it to you simply. The Republican Party subsists on donations and funding from the billionaire business class, but they subsist on votes from the middle and working class. That's where they get their votes. They get their votes from states like West Virginia, where they're coal miners, states like Texas, where they're cattle ranchers, states like Indiana, where they used to make things, where there used to be factories, but they get their funding from Wall Street. So how do you reconcile these two positions? Because these are economically at odds with one another. Well, you create someone like Trump. And Trump is going to play up the cultural, social angle, and even the economic angle for the voters, and say, build the wall, deport them all. We speak English, not Spanish. This is countries for Americans, heritage Americans, whatever. Then you get elected and you don't deport the illegals that are actually working. You make a show of it because you need those voters. You deport the criminals, you make these gestures, you convince them somehow that you're doing something that you're not actually doing. And then when you actually go to work as the president, you protect the economic interests of your donors, of the billionaires. And that's the dirty secret of the GOP. Why are you not getting mass deportations? It's not because Stephen Miller didn't figure it out, okay? That's not why. Look, they got $90 billion for ICE. They've got the Immigration and Naturalization Act. They have the jurisdiction, they have the money, they have the authority. They could do it, and they were doing it. When Trump first got in, ICE was accidentally deporting people from their jobs. They were arresting people at the meatpacking plant. They were arresting people at the Hyundai plant. They were arresting people in the Home Depot parking lots. They can do it. They were doing it. Trump told them to stop. He explicitly and specifically told Stephen Miller to stop doing those things. Why? Because he got the call. He got the call from the asset managers. He got the call from the banks. He got the call from Wall Street. They got nervous. They read the news. They saw job site raid, illegal immigrants not showing up to work, afraid of being deported. And these people that watch the news closely to get the edge, trading stocks and speculating, they said, uh-oh, we got a problem. We have persistently high inflation. We have a Federal Reserve chairman that won't bring interest rates down. We have a tariff war and a trade war with China. And now in the middle of all this, our slaves are not going to work because they're afraid that they'll get deported by Trump. So they called Trump up. They called up the Commerce Secretary. They called up all the different people in the cabinet, and they said, shut it down. Our slaves are afraid to go to work, and if we can't get them to go to work, then we got to hire American. And Americans want health care. Americans want a living wage. Americans need to be trained up because they've been excluded from this job market for 30 years because a decision was made that they would be replaced by foreigners because that's cheaper. So Trump called up Stephen Miller and said, we got to stop. We're going to give H-2A visas, H-1A visas to the illegal farm workers. He said, we're not going to deport people from job sites. We're not going to go to a job site with more than 50 workers. We're not going to implement E-Verify. Instead, we're going to have these visible patrols of ICE, right? We're going to have ICE just walking down the street, Border Patrol parading around downtown Chicago so that all these liberals can take their pictures and go on TikTok, and Republicans will say, oh boy, the deportations are happening. Look, there they are in uniform parading around the streets. Okay? That's the trick. That's the conceit. They never intended to deport anybody, and this is why. Because you deport 10 million people and GDP is negative. You deport 10 million people and inflation ticks up. Prices are going to go up 2%. So they'll never do it. And you have to understand structurally what is happening. To get elected, Republicans need billions of dollars. Who has the discretionary funds to contribute billions of dollars every 2 years to throw into a sinkhole for an election? The capitalist class, the billionaires. That's who has the money to do it. Ken Griffin, the Bernard Marcus at Home Depot, Uline, the one of the other big Republican donors. These are the people that have the money to put up for the Republicans year over year. So the Republicans got to keep the business interest happy. In the House, in the Senate, in the White House, in the state races. And so as long as that is the case, you're not going to get your deportations. The economic interest, the capitalist interest is always going to win out. And listen, I'm not a communist, okay? When I say capitalist, I mean the people that own capital. I mean the privately accumulated capital. The people that have billions of dollars in assets. Most people have no capital. Most people have a negative net worth. You have credit card debt. You're living paycheck to paycheck. You are not a capitalist because you have no capital. You don't own your home. You don't own your car. You're delinquent on your payments. You're living paycheck to paycheck. You have no savings. You have no stocks. You have no nothing. You are not a capitalist. You are a worker. Okay? Most people are becoming basically indentured servants in a sense. Everything is as a service. And we are becoming less wealthy. So you need to think in terms of the economics. You can't vote for Trump and say, I hope he's going to do mass deportations for me. Why would he do that? He's going to do mass deportations because you're uncomfortable with diversity? I don't like that my school is all Hispanics. I voted for Trump so he can remove these people. Trump doesn't give a fuck about that. He don't live with them. You think all the immigrants live in Mar-a-Lago? You think the immigrants live in Palm Beach? The immigrants work at Palm Beach. The immigrants don't live in Trump Tower. They don't live in Mar-a-Lago. They work in Trump Tower. They work at Mar-a-Lago. They're delivering Uber Eats and DoorDash in the Trump Tower lobby. Okay? So there's no culture clash for Trump or Tucker or any of these people. It's a culture clash for us because, we have to share the commons with them. So that's the dirty secret of the GOP. You want to know why you were never going to get them? Because the billionaires that fund the GOP employ these people and profit off of them. That's why. It's got nothing to do with anything else. So if anybody tells you otherwise and says, well, I feel like Trump is going to do it. I feel like Trump is our guy and the posters are in control. And look at this press release. Dude, f*** the press releases. People say, look, the Department of Homeland Security X account just posted a meme. That doesn't matter. That's some intern. That guy is getting paid $40,000 a year. Okay? That is some shithead that is getting paid a pittance. And he's all jazzed up. He's texting mommy and daddy. I'm working in the Capitol. I'm working in D.C. That guy has no power. That guy is a nothing. Posters are in control. J.D. Vance is following somebody on Twitter. The DHS account posted a press release. Yeah, that and $1 will buy you a cup of coffee. I wipe my ass with that. You know what matters? Jamie Dimon has Trump on speed dial. That's what matters. Okay? The head of BlackRock, Larry Fink, he's got Trump on speed dial. That's what matters. And those people are not nativists, okay? They're not reading V-Dare. They're not nativists that want heritage Americans to preside. Like, what? They don't care about any of that. They're literally building skyscrapers for their bank, which is dependent on the macroeconomic success of the country. That has very little to do with how you feel about the fact they put a Mexican ice cream parlor in your neighborhood, So it is just a flawed way of thinking to think that these people that write Substack articles have more power and more influence over the Trump government than the billionaires that gave Trump hundreds of millions of dollars. You see the problem? You're following some 35-year-old burnout that makes 40 grand a month posting articles on Chronicles and a Substack telling you everything's under control. Trump is listening to us. And you think that guy has more pull over the government than Larry Fink and Jamie Dimon. And that's insane. That's mental illness. So this is why you actually need an insurgent candidate that is truly disruptive. You need someone that is going to take on the billionaires. You need someone that is going to take on the money power. As Spengler wrote, you need a true Caesar-like figure who is going to rally the popular power, the people power, the national power against the money power. Because that's what it is. It's money. Money, it's sort of like medium is the message. It has this inertia all by itself. The market itself has to be stopped by the state. That's what has to happen. Anyway, so that's that Wall Street Journal editorial. Very, very important point to understand for anybody that would place their hopes and dreams and aspirations on the next Republican being based. And did you notice, this is the last thing I'll say, then we'll move on. You know what's really interesting? Have you noticed that all of a sudden, some of the planners at Davos are now saying that maybe we have too many migrants? Have you noticed this? That all of a sudden Klaus Schwab and Larry Fink and Hillary Clinton, they're now saying maybe we're taking in too many migrants? Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because they got red-pilled? Why do you think the United States is shutting down its borders? Why do you think the United Kingdom is going to try to control regular migration? Is it because they had an epiphany and the people have had enough and they got based? It's because we are just now starting to see technological unemployment. We are just now starting to see the disruption to the labor market caused by AI. Soon, we're going to have a very similar effect with robotics. And what do you think happens when AI and robots start replacing all the white collar and blue collar work? You're going to have a lot of unemployed people. What are you going to do with all of them? Now, all of those producers and workers who are also consumers, as this article says, they're now going to become beneficiaries of the state. They're going to be on UBI. And the more of those people you have, you got a lot of problems. Because these are a lot of people with nothing to do all day. And they're going to need very expensive health care, and they're going to need housing, and they're going to need food and other stuff. So now all of a sudden, now the central planners say, I think we maybe have too many migrants. Maybe this is a problem. Well, that has everything to do with the macroeconomic trend, which is that pretty soon maybe we're not going to have a need for labor. There's a question, will there be labor? What kind of labor will there be in an economy where we have an artificial general intelligence? Now, I'm not going to weigh in on whether these predictions are true or whether they're overstated. All I'm saying is the reason what is true is that some of the planners are now expressing doubt, and that's calculated. Hillary Clinton doesn't say a word which isn't choreographed. So it's not like she made an offhand remark. This reflects a changing consensus among these elite circles. And it doesn't have to do with these nativistic sentiments. It has to do with the change in the macroeconomic projections of the people that are paying her speaking fees and buying her book. That's why you're getting that. So it just speaks to the fact that that is what drives everything. And ultimately, that is what we have to get in front of if we want to have real change. So anyway, that's the Wall Street Journal. I do want to get into the situation in Iran. And we're running out of time here a little bit. We're an hour in, but I'm going to talk about Iran because this is a really big deal. We are into our coverage of the imminent action in Iran. And today we have another update for you. The buildup of military force continues. Second aircraft carrier strike group has entered the Mediterranean Sea as of today. That is the USS Gerald Ford, our biggest, most advanced aircraft carrier, which is joined by 3 destroyers, has entered the Mediterranean Sea. It is on its way to the Middle East, where it will join another carrier strike group, the USS Abraham Lincoln, as well as a number of other warships, aircraft, personnel that have been forward deployed. That aircraft carrier, once in place, will put the United States in a position as soon as Saturday to launch an all-out attack on Iran. This is according to the latest information from Axios and other sources close to the administration. They say that as early as Saturday, we will be in a position, offensively and defensively, to start the attack on Iran. And this is a story from the New York Times. It says, quote, the rapid buildup of U.S. forces in the Middle East has progressed to the point that President Trump has the option to take military action against Iran as soon as this weekend, according to officials inside the Pentagon, leaving the White House with high-stakes choices about pursuing diplomacy or war. Mr. Trump has given no indication that he has made a decision about how to proceed, but the drive to assemble a military force capable of striking Iran's nuclear program, its ballistic missiles, and accompanying launch sites has continued this week, despite indirect talks between the two nations on Tuesday, with Iran seeking 2 weeks to come back with fleshed-out proposals for a diplomatic solution. Mr. Trump has repeatedly demanded that Iran give up its nuclear program, including an agreement not to enrich any more uranium. The Prime Minister of Israel, whose country potentially might take part in an attack, has been pushing for action to weaken Iran's ability to launch missiles at Israel. Israeli forces, which have been on heightened alert for weeks, have been making more preparations for a possible war, and a meeting of Israel's security cabinet was moved to Sunday from Thursday, according to 2 Israeli defense officials. Many administration officials have expressed skepticism about the prospect of reaching a diplomatic deal with Tehran. The indirect talks on Tuesday in Geneva yesterday ended with what Iran's foreign minister said was an agreement on a set of guiding principles. The U.S. said the two sides made progress, but added that big gaps remain. So let me set the stage here for you. We'll do a little bit of background, then we'll talk about where this is going imminently. So as you know, we are in the second leg of our campaign against Iran. It all started last year. I mean, it goes back much further than that. But in the second Trump administration, it started last year. As soon as Trump got into office, Netanyahu started coming by asking us to bomb Iran's nuclear program, which we then did. We engaged Iran in negotiations, came to an impasse, and then Israel provoked Iran into a war, and the United States intervened to cripple Iran's nuclear complex by bombing Fordo, Esfahan, and Natanz. And so we resolved the issue temporarily. And we resolved the issue temporarily by increasing Iran's breakout time. What is that timeline? How long will it take for Iran to get a nuclear bomb if they decide they want one? What is that timeline? Before those strikes, it might have been 3 months. If Iran made the decision, they'd have a primitive device in 3 months. After the strikes, maybe it's 2 years. So that's what that accomplished. Well, Netanyahu has started coming back. Came back in December. Came back again recently. He came back, I believe it was last week. And once again, Netanyahu is asking for another attack on Iran. And this time, Netanyahu is asking us to bomb their missiles. Israel says that Iran is going to preemptively attack Israel this time. And they're going to do it with ballistic missiles. And so the United States has to go in and bomb Iran's missiles before they get a chance to do that. So this is where we are. Now, after Netanyahu came to visit the United States in December, these protests mysteriously started out of nowhere in Iran, and they threatened to topple the government. The United States was going to intervene, maybe to push over the regime. But we didn't have enough assets in the region. We only had one carrier strike group. We didn't have enough defensive capabilities. Our troops were vulnerable to a retaliatory strike, so Trump called it off. But at the same time that he called off the strike, he started sending in a huge force package to remedy the situation. So Trump started sending in a ton of warships into the Middle East and a ton of missile defense systems and started moving our forces out of harm's way and started moving in aircraft and cargo ships and refueling aircraft and all kinds of assets to prepare for a possible attack on Iran and to defend against a counterattack from Iran. And a couple weeks ago, Trump gave them an ultimatum, and he said, either you are going to fully surrender and capitulate to our demands, or we are going to destroy your regime. And since then, the United States has been engaged in diplomacy with Iran. I say diplomacy because that's not really what it is. They've opened up indirect talks between the U.S. and Iran. And this was done at the behest of our other Muslim allies. Only after an intense lobbying effort from Turkey, Qatar, Pakistan, the Emirates, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, did the United States relent, and they gave Iran one last chance to make a deal. Now, this is a very important thing to understand, okay? A lot has been said about these talks. They are being called negotiations. They are nothing like that. That is not what this is. I've seen this for the past 3 weeks. I've even, used improper language about this. These are not negotiations. That is not what is happening here. Okay? For the past 3 weeks, yes, Washington and Tehran have engaged in indirect talks. They are not negotiations. Why? Because the United States is not negotiating. Understand the difference. Last year, arguably, the United States was negotiating. And Steve Witkoff and some of the other personnel were looking for a creative solution where Iran is going to give some concessions and maybe we would accept some technical concessions, but then we bombed them. And now they're weaker than ever before. They're in no position to negotiate from the perspective of our administration. Their proxy network has been destroyed. Their nuclear program has been buried underneath rubble. The only thing that really threatens Israel and our bases is their ballistic missile program. That's it. And so from the perspective of Washington and Tel Aviv, they are almost neutralized. They're badly diminished. So the United States engaging in talks is not the same as negotiations. We're not going to compromise. We're not going to change our position. What was expressed in Oman last week and what was expressed in Switzerland yesterday was not a willingness to negotiate, but rather we are giving Iran a chance to capitulate to our demands. That's what that was. Let's be very clear. The United States has been firm from the time Trump made the ultimatum several weeks ago. In Oman and in Switzerland, the U.S. position is, this is where we are, you got to meet us here. Not we're going to meet in the middle, not we're going to work something out. The White House, the press secretary, the Secretary of State, the envoy, the president, the vice president, they have all said, our position is you're giving up enrichment or you're going to die, and that's it. And Iran is trying to stall for time. Iran is begging them for negotiations. The Ayatollah gave a dispensation for Pezeshkian and Araghchi to negotiate. And they are making these concessions. Well, we'll agree to limit enrichment for 3 years. Well, we'll give up our stockpile of enriched uranium. And the United States is saying, that's great. We love to hear it, but there's still a long way for you to go between what you're offering and what we're asking for. The United States is not moved by this. Now, what does that mean? As we've talked about, what is the substance of the negotiations? It concerns nuclear enrichment. Iran has the ability to enrich uranium, the infrastructure, the technology, the expertise, the raw material, and the United States is telling them you have to give it up. And they are telling us they will never give it up. That's really what it is. And that's what it was last year. And that's what it was when Biden tried to negotiate in 2023. And that's what it was in 2020. And that's what it was in 2015 when the JCPOA was agreed upon. That is the impasse. They have enrichment. We want them to give it up. They refuse. Where does that leave us here today? Well, like I said on Telegram and like I've been saying, the United States and Israel perceive Iran as weaker than ever before. And so now we're engaging them in this gunboat diplomacy where we put an armada off their coast, point the guns at them and say, surrender or else. And like I said, people are calling these negotiations. It isn't what it is. From the perspective of our side, we are in a position either to extract all the concessions we want, or we're going to do a regime change, or we're going to bomb them, and then whatever is remaining is going to make a deal. But that is really where we are. All of this is to say we are going to get military action. A deal is not in the cards, okay? And the reason I'm insistent upon this is because I saw an interview today between Steve Bannon and Kurt Mills. Kurt Mills is an American conservative, and he's wrong about everything. I probably agree with him on most things, but he's one of these analysts that's very Israel critical, but also very pro-Trump. And he was there last year saying that we're going to get a deal with Iran. Oh, Israel bombed Iran? Well, we'll never participate. Oh, we participated? Well, at least it only lasted a day. Kurt Mills is back for another round of being wrong about everything. I saw him on Steve Bannon today, and he said, if the United States insists on zero enrichment, then we're not going to get a deal. But if we concede, then we're going to get a deal. And I hear this. There's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of talk. There are a lot of headlines. It's bullshit. Don't listen to it. Okay? The headlines say, progress has been made in the talks. The talks have been constructive. Both sides say the talks have been good. These are press releases. Press releases from the other side. Actually think about what is at stake here. Actually think about what is said. Think about what the actual actors involved are thinking and what they want. The headlines, of course, are going to say the talks are good. Of course it's going to say that. Of course Iran is going to say they were productive. Read between the lines. The United States is saying There are gaps between our position and theirs. They've got 2 weeks to meet us where we are. What does that sound like? That's an ultimatum. Now, if the United States is giving Iran an ultimatum, then you have to think about, well, if they're not going to change their mind, will Iran? And the answer is no. If Iran has come this far, they're not going to give up enrichment. They've been tricked by the United States. They don't trust the United States. They think the United States and Israel are in cahoots to destroy Iran. So why would they give up enrichment at this point? They believe that they're going to get bombed anyway. So why are they engaging in negotiations? Well, just like the United States. They're not going to budge on their position. They're engaging in negotiations to buy time. If they can buy another 2 weeks, that's another 150 ballistic missiles that they can throw at Israel all at the same time. If they can buy another month, that's 300 missiles. It's another dozen attack helicopters from Russia. It gives them more time to put the leadership underground and protect them from a decapitation strike. So people are saying, in other words, I hope these negotiations work. I hope they're going to make a deal. I wonder how the talks are going. They're not real talks. It's not really happening. So where does that leave us? Well, we're going to war. As a matter of fact, we've been in a war. We are in a war. We have been in a war. What else do you call it? What else do you call it when we are engaging in industrial sabotage in Iran for years? Economic sanctions against Iran for years. Secondary sanctions against Iran, against their other trading partners. What do you call it when we're assassinating their leaders, when we're bombing them, when we're bombing their proxies? What do you call that other than a war? We are in a state of war against Iran, and we have been for a long time. And we are going to strike Iran again in this war. The question now is, what is that strike going to look like? And what is the goal right now? Well, let's talk about what the strike looks like. It's helpful to consider the actual forces that are assembled. So this is from the Wall Street Journal. It talks about the size of the presence that has been assembled. It says, quote, the U.S. is sending significant numbers of jet fighters and support aircraft to the Middle East, assembling the greatest amount of air power in the region since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The U.S. is ready to take action against Iran, but President Trump hasn't decided whether to order strikes and whether the aim would be to halt Iran's nuclear program, wipe out its missiles, or to topple the regime. So it's two questions. Will he strike, and what's his end game? Like we talked about, I think it's a certainty that he will strike. Over the past few days, the U.S. has continued to move F-35 and F-22 jet fighters toward the Middle East. A second aircraft carrier loaded with attack and electronic warfare planes is on the way. Command and control aircraft are inbound, and critical air defenses have been deployed to the region in recent weeks. The firepower will give the U.S. the option of carrying out a sustained weeks-long air war against Iran instead of the one-and-done midnight hammer strike that was carried out last June. Options include a campaign to kill scores of Iranian political and military leaders with the goal of overthrowing the government, as well as an air attack that would be limited to striking targets, including nuclear and ballistic missile facilities. Both would involve a potentially weeks-long operation. As formidable as the buildup appears, however, it is just a fraction of the assets that were deployed for the 1991 Gulf War or the 2003 invasion of Iraq. For the former, the U.S. deployed 6 aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf and Red Sea. And for Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003, the U.S. Air Force positioned 863 aircraft in the Middle East. Desert Storm in 1991 included 1,300 aircraft. So the reason that it's important to consider the size and the scope of the force is because it tells you what they're planning. In 1990, when we invaded Iraq, we had 1,300 aircraft, 6 aircraft carriers. In 2003, we had 900 aircraft, and we had a coalition with the United Kingdom and other countries. 200,000 troops invaded Iraq. We don't have anything close to that assembled in the Middle East right now. 2 aircraft carriers, squadrons instead of wings, so maybe you have 100 aircraft in total as opposed to 1,000. 2 aircraft carriers as opposed to 6, 50,000 personnel as opposed to 200,000. What does this tell us? Well, if that's the size of the force, then it's not going to be a ground invasion. And I know that sounds like, of course it's not a ground invasion, but you never know. Because here's the thing. If you want to topple the Iranian regime, you can't just defeat them with air power. You're going to need a ground force to go in and actually kill all their soldiers. You're going to need a lot of soldiers on the ground to go and actually secure the cities and the infrastructure and kill the personnel and gain control over the country. If you don't do that, well, then there's still going to be 1 million Iranian armed forces and Revolutionary Guard tomorrow, or a week after your air campaign, and there's still going to be a chain of command. So you actually do need a ground force to have some replacement government, to actually have regime change. If that's not in place, then it doesn't look like they're going to pursue a ground war or a regime change war. So what is this force equipped to do? If it's not going to be Desert Storm, if it's not going to be Iraqi freedom, what is it going to look like? Well, this looks like the force package that was assembled in April 2024 and July 2024, when the United States was there to simply deter Iran from going all out against Israel. It was a deterrent. It looks like the force package that was assembled last June when we bombed Iran once from the United States. It was missile carriers in the region that launched some Minuteman missiles at Iran's nuclear complex. It was B-2 stealth bombers from Missouri, which actually flew to Iran and bombed Fordo and Natanz with the bunker buster bombs. It wasn't even anything from Diego Garcia, wasn't anything from the region. So if the force package resembles those instances, then what you have is this: probably enough force to carry out an air campaign and enough force to defend U.S. personnel against a counterattack. It looks like that is the type of force that they have in place. Now, what kind of air campaign can we expect? Again, that's really the question. Is it going to be an air campaign to destroy Iran's nuclear complex and missiles? Is it to destroy what is left of their nuclear program and to prevent them from making additional missiles and launching missiles at Israel so that the country has a degraded defensive capability? Or is the goal here to kill all of Iran's leaders? Because that could be the purpose, to go and bomb heavily fortified facilities where Iran's military and civilian leadership are hiding out. In the former scenario, we are making Iran weak and vulnerable, potentially for future negotiations. You destroy their missiles, you destroy their nuclear program, and then you can basically impose regime change on them. And really, there's no reason to negotiate with Iran at that point. They got nothing left. It'll take them years to rebuild. In the other scenario, you kill all the leadership so that they are replaced from lower in the chain of command, and then they negotiate. It's helpful, I think, to look at what happened in Venezuela. We put one carrier strike group off the coast of Venezuela. We didn't even really kill that many people. We didn't even really do any serious airstrikes. What did we do in Venezuela? We plucked out one guy, and then what did we do immediately after? We put a carrier off the coast. We bombed some of their fishing boats. We bombed one of their ports. We plucked out their top guy. And then what remained was pliable and willing to negotiate. Maduro was succeeded by his vice president, and now she is giving an audience to our Secretary of Energy. And you got this, which is so insane to think about. We kidnapped your president. The vice president succeeds him, and now she is standing on a stage with our energy secretary who is here to take all their oil. Hi, nice to meet you. You just kidnapped my boss. Now take all of our oil. Let's pose for a photo op. But what was the MO there? What was the Trump 2 MO in Venezuela? It was using a limited amount of power, using a limited amount of, you could say, smart power, hard power, but employed in a limited and restrained and smart way to decapitate part of the regime. You could call it a partial decapitation. Not even necessarily a regime change. I like the word decapitation because the regime did not actually change at all. Same security apparatus, same political apparatus. It's all the same. We just took out one of the top guys. And then, and this is the most important step, we went to the successor and said, okay, now what do you want to do? You can come to New York and we can put you in prison too, because we own you. We can do these things to you, or you can make a deal. And Maduro's successor said, okay, I'll make a deal. I'll give you all the oil. Maybe this is what they're going for in Iran. And maybe that's why it worked out this way. They did Venezuela first, and then they sent the same aircraft carrier from the Caribbean to the Middle East. And they're telling Iran, you're going to surrender, you're going to capitulate, you're going to make a deal. We put this huge presence there. We demonstrated our capabilities in Venezuela. We demonstrated our ability and willingness and resolve to use force. And now we're going to do something to Iran. What specifically it's going to be, it's hard to say. Maybe it's both. Maybe we go in and for a week, we just rape them. Like we just destroy their missiles. We destroy what's left of their nukes. We kill a ton of their leadership. And then whoever gets up in the rubble, whether that's Iranian armed forces, who knows? It's some element of the opposition which has been collaborating with the CIA or something. Whoever remains after the week of bombing, we're going to go to that guy and say, all right, are you ready to negotiate now? And maybe that's the play. Maybe that's what it looks like at this point in time. And the reason I say that is because if you don't have a ground force, if you don't have popular opposition on the ground, which is armed and trained, like in Syria, and they were Al-Qaeda, but whatever. If you don't have some form of a ground force, if you don't have an alternative regime to take the place of the existing regime, then you can't do regime change. You can bomb them to kingdom come. But if you don't have ground forces, if you don't have someone with legitimacy, with an organization that's ready to step up, the regime will not change. You're just going to kick the can down the road until the next time you got to bomb them after they've rebuilt their defenses. So if these things are not in place, then that leads me to believe it's not a real regime change. You're not going to topple the regime with a week of bombing. So what's really the goal here? Well, again, you may not change the regime, but you can kill a lot of people in the regime and you can destroy a lot of their stuff. And after a week of doing that, maybe whoever is left with whatever is left is going to be far more willing to make a deal. Maybe that's the play. And I continue to believe that the administration, on some level, must recognize that an all-out war would be catastrophic. We are in a midterm election year. Do you think the Trump administration believes it is wise to engage Iran in a protracted war like Iraq that is going to go on forever? No. They don't want to be fighting a war in Iran in November. They don't want to be fighting a war in Iran where oil prices get jacked up because the Strait of Hormuz closes, where Americans are getting blown to smithereens in Al Udeid and elsewhere. They don't want it to go on for a long period of time. They want it to be quick, painless, and they want to succeed. And I think that is their thinking. So that would lead me to believe they're going to use their limited amount of force in the region for another smart decapitation strike, and maybe as an alternative or on top of that, they're going to degrade Iran's defenses. And on the other side of that, they're going to have something like what you saw in Venezuela. Maybe it's not even a regime change. Maybe you just get a president who's going to work with us. Maybe you get an Ayatollah, or maybe the Ayatollah's dead after this. But you're going to get a government that can negotiate with the United States that will not resist. Now, whether that is successful is an altogether different question. How successful will this operation be? It depends. And will there be a pliable regime or remnant of the regime that is willing to work with the United States? That seems unlikely. But we just don't know. We don't know who's going to die, who's going to be killed, who will be remaining, and how their psychology will change after seeing what we're capable of. But I think that is going to be the approach. And I think it's going to happen within a matter of weeks. I don't think that the United States intends to be hanging out there with all of this force in the region indefinitely. I don't think they want to do this later. I think they want to get it done as quickly and as soon as possible for contingency's sake and for other reasons. So I think we're going to get, within 2 to 4 weeks, you're going to get a major air campaign. It's going to target the missiles. It's going to retarget nuclear. And I think it's going to target some element of the regime, probably specifically the Ayatollah, because ultimately he is holding up the deal. The Ayatollah is the supreme leader. The Revolutionary Guard answers to him, and the Revolutionary Guard built the proxy network. He will not allow Pezeshkian to negotiate much of the time. He is the sovereign of the country. It is an Islamic republic under the control of jurists, led by the top cleric, the supreme leader. He's the symbol of the regime. He's the head of state. He's the sovereign. So I think that that is roughly what it's going to look like. That's my guess right now. If I were to forecast it, and this stuff is never precise, but if I were to forecast it, that is my best guess based on what we have in the region. Of course, anything can happen. But given the two positions, what's being said by the White House, what's being said by Iran, what either side is willing to accept, the amount of force there, it's not too big, but it's not small either. Midterm election, the timeline, political constraints, I think you take all that information together, and that's about as good of a picture as you're going to get about what this is going to be. And here's the thing. Ultimately, you know there is going to be a confrontation because Israel wants it. And that's really all you need to know. You might think it's political suicide for Trump to go to war in Iran. You might think it's geopolitical suicide to pursue regime change in Iran. You may think this is totally insane and a terrible idea, and I agree with you. As to whether it is likely, think about what is more likely. Think about how far Israel has come here. They have defeated Hamas. They have defeated Hezbollah. They have defeated Bashar al-Assad. They have removed the Revolutionary Guard from Syria. They've gotten the United States to bomb Iran's nuclear program. Iran has used a lot of its ballistic missiles. There was a popular uprising a month ago. Their economy's never been weaker. Secondary sanctions are in effect. They've got a favorable president in the White House. They've got a favorable party in the Congress. In a word, Israel has come all this way in the past 2 years. So much fighting, so many bombs. They've expended so much political capital. They've lost the affection and the support of the world, and everyone hates them. And their ultimate goal is regime change in Iran. That's what all of this has been for. Rolling back the proxy network systematically, destroying Iran's strategic weapons, its missiles and nukes, and then cutting off the head of the snake. And once you have a favorable regime in Iran, Israel has hegemony over the Middle East because they're the only nuclear power. They have a qualitative military edge guaranteed by the United States, and all the countries there will be under the suzerainty of the United States. Think of it. Turkey is a NATO country. Egypt has a treaty with the United States. So does Jordan. Lebanon is under the thumb of the United States. Syria is working with the United States. Iraq is a puppet of the United States. Saudi Arabia, dependent on us. The Emirates, ally of Israel. Qatar, dependent on us increasingly. You get rid of Iran, that's it. Pakistan is a U.S. ally. You get rid of Iran, and Israel has their run of the Middle East. We won't have hegemony there. They will. That's the grand prize. That's what they're playing for. And so is it more crazy that the U.S. will go to war with Iran for regime change, or is it more crazy that Israel gives up short of their grand prize? They've come all this way. Iran is weaker than ever. The window is wide open but closing. Favorable governance in the United States. All the sacrifices they made, are they going to stop short of toppling the regime? And think of, if they stop short and Iran somehow makes a deal, well, what happens? Then they get integrated, investment pours in, their economy comes back, the people aren't angry anymore, they rebuild their missiles, then they're good, then they're never going anywhere. So Israel is either going to totally lose or totally win, and they always get what they want. So I think odds are it's regime change, guaranteed. Only way that's going to happen is with the United States is going to intervene in some form. Now, the question is just how that's going to happen. Are they going to just cut the head off with the Ayatollah? Are they going to have to topple the regime forcefully? It all depends on how this plays out militarily. And that is where we are. It is a war. It is a military confrontation. And we are serving Israel's aims here. And it doesn't look like there's any way out of it. So that is where we are with Iran. But like I said, we're going to be watching it very closely into tomorrow, Friday, next week. Looks like the weekend is going to be the earliest. Rubio is preparing to visit Israel at the end of the month. Iran was given 2 weeks yesterday. So the window looks like Saturday to a week from this coming Tuesday. That is going to be the window, maybe when a strike will occur, although, of course, it could be after that as well. But that's where we are. So we'll keep an eye on it. But that's all I have for you tonight. We're going to move on. We're going to take a look at our super chats. We'll see what you guys have to say. This has been a long show. I'm getting a little bit exhausted here. It's been like a hour and 40-minute monologue. Can you believe a 100-minute monologue? It's a little nutty. All right. Okay, let's take a look at our super chats. We'll see what you guys have to say about all this. I think that's the best analysis you're going to get at this point in time. But as always, we got to wait and see. Okay, let's take a look. Let's see what we got here.
Let's get right to it. You know what I'm realizing? Perhaps, I'm sure y'all have already realized it. Y'all are usually ahead of the curve when it comes to a lot of this stuff. Donald Trump is Carolyn Levitt. Levitt. Donald Trump is Carolyn Levitt. Donald Trump is no different than a press secretary for the oligarchs. You know how she has to go up there and she has to present certain things that are being done on behalf of the administration, and she has to present it in a way where she's selling something. She wants her audience to buy into whatever it is that the administration is doing, and she has to express it in a certain way that the general public, when we look at it, even if the people that are sitting there, the press that are asking questions, are being combative, she has to present it in a way where people are looking at Donald Trump as favorable as possible so we can condone and be complicit in whatever it is that they're doing. That's what Donald Trump's role is, as well as any other president's role is when it comes to America. I believe that Tucker Carlson recently talked about this when it comes to this supra government, I believe was the term that he used, the government that governs the government. We all know that there's a power structure. Well, I don't know if we all know it, but I believe that there's a power structure that stands above the presidents, stands above the governments, perhaps stands above the leaders of all these countries. Something above the United Nations. There's something above a board, whatever it may be, that goes above and beyond the CEO, which is the president. And those boards, there's probably a board made up of the people that are above Bibi Netanyahu as the prime minister. There's people that are having these meetings, and they are dictating and determining how things are going to go. Now, when it comes specifically to America, this is why a lot of people are hopefully starting to wake up and realize, Democrat, Republican, it's just two sides of the same bird. This is all strategic. It's all strategic, and we say it all the time, so I know I'm preaching to the choir and beating a dead horse, but I think it's very important for us to realize, and for others maybe who aren't listening to this, for us to convince everybody else that we are all getting played. We're getting played. They need the chaos of us going back and forth while they flip-flop based on what's in their best interest. They flip-flop on a consistent basis. Nick brought this up when he was talking about 80% of people that are, there's an 80% part of the Republican Party that will just agree with whatever Donald Trump is pushing. Whether it's, hey, I believe in cold today or I believe in hot tomorrow. It doesn't matter. They're just going to follow Trump. They're just going to, what is this guy's name? I forget the guy's name that Nick mentioned. I'll see it in the notes, but he mentioned, was it a guy named Kurt? Yeah, Kurt Mills. There's people like him, and I don't know who Kurt Mills is, but based on how Nick was describing him, he was a lot of these MAGA people. They put their faith in Donald Trump and a person above putting their faith in their principles, their values. They put their faith in a political party rather than committing to principles. So when you put your faith in a person, when you just trust a person rather than trusting your principles, you're going to be flip-flopping on everything. And that's what we've done on a consistent basis. So Kurt Mills doesn't represent, to me, he's not the outlier. He's the majority when it comes to both Democrats and Republicans. This is how we see politics. This is why they always have to emotionally trigger us into just not liking each other, because then when you're just not liking each other, the logic goes out the window. It's not about policy anymore. It's about my feelings. My feelings outweigh the logic that comes into play when it comes to policy. So Nick is spot on when he's saying a lot of this, but I think it serves us all a great purpose for us to just put things in proper perspective. And for me, that's seeing Donald Trump as just a press secretary. He's going to say whatever needs to be said in order to appease and serve the people that he's pledged his allegiance to. See, politicians, they're supposed to pledge their allegiance and represent we the people. But obviously, we all know that that's not happening, because look at everything that's going on. Who's asking for this? Who's asking for this? They didn't run on this. How do you run on one thing? You run on all of these things, actually. And then when you get in office, you do the complete opposite. But we spend all this time arguing, bickering back and forth about the policies that Donald Trump is running on. Then he gets in office and does the complete opposite. And Nick said, just like the 80% of Republicans that will just agree with whatever Donald Trump goes along with, there's the same group of 80% that will just agree with whatever Biden and Kamala Harris go along with on the Democratic side. But we also have to keep in mind that outside of those 80% groups, when it comes to the 80% of Republicans that will just agree and go along with whatever Donald Trump says, there's also 80% of that 80% is probably just likely to disagree with anything that Biden and Kamala Harris does, whether it's good or bad, whether it aligns with their policies, because who knows what's good and bad, right? But whether or not it aligns with their policies. If Kamala Harris was doing the exact same thing that Donald Trump is doing now, these same people that are supporting Donald Trump doing it, they would have a fit. Donald Trump would have a fit. He would be outraged. So we see these inconsistencies. We see people going back and forth on a lot of this stuff. And the migrant crisis, that's just the latest topic to highlight this. It just highlights it. It's like, here we have Donald Trump, the person that's saying, hey, we're going to have mass migration. We're going to deport all these people. 10 million people came in here illegally. We got to get rid of them. But then when he gets in office, we realize, he probably already realized it. We realize that, oh, Donald Trump actually is just serving the elites that we're not saying elites anymore, oligarchs. He's just serving these oligarchs. They want the migrants here. They want the illegal migrants here for all the reasons that Nick named. And it doesn't really have to be that many other reasons outside of it being cheap labor. They can pay them under the table, don't ask for benefits. So overall, it's just cheap, easier, hardworking labor, as well as they spend money. They contribute to the economy. You're going to remove 10 million people from our economy? Who's that going to hurt? It's going to hurt maybe the Americans. I mean, it's going to help maybe the Americans who no longer may have to compete and now get new opportunities with the people that were working under the table or working for low wages. Now they have opportunities, right? We, the American people, have opportunities. However, the oligarchs don't care about that. Why do we think that the oligarchs have as much pride in America as we do? Clearly, they don't have as much pride in America. Clearly, they don't have pride in America, period. They have pride in their pockets. They have pride in their power. They just want to keep leverage. They just convince us to have pride in America, so therefore we'll look the other way when certain things happen. So we're seeing this play out, and Nick mentioned, I believe the Davos meeting with Hillary Clinton. He mentioned the recent meeting where now you're seeing a lot of these central planners, as he called them, start to call out mass migration. Hillary Clinton saying that, oh, we need to get this under wraps. We need to get a hold on this. We need to gain control of it. It's getting out of control. And it's like, that's the energy. We've never heard that energy from your side, from you. And like Nick said, everything that Hillary Clinton says, we know is strategically planned out. She's only saying things that are aligning with the agenda of I was getting ready to say that E word again, of the oligarchs that she serves. That's it. That's it. We know exactly who Hillary Clinton is. When I see Hillary Clinton speak, it's like a demonic, I'm not going to say the devil, but it's like something demonic is there. You know, she's serving something that does not represent a high frequency, doesn't represent purity. It just represents, if it is purity, it's in the demonic way. That's what comes across to me every time I hear her speak. I don't trust a word that she says, But when you think about Hillary Clinton, and I think I looked up a couple different things as far as, what exactly her stances were on a few of these different issues. Let me try to find it. So I was trying to figure out, okay, now why are people like Hillary Clinton pulling back? Why are people like Hillary Clinton pulling back? So I looked up a couple of different things that I'll share with y'all. So at the Munich Security Conference in February 2026, Hillary Clinton made headlines by stating that mass migration has gone too far. Why is she saying it? She described migration as disruptive and destabilizing to the West. Okay, that's after you and your side allowed 10 million people just open the door, incentivized, like, yo, come on. Like, not just open the door, but they're actually incentivizing people to come here. But now she brings this up. So political pragmatism. Clinton argued that unless mainstream leaders get a handle on migration, it will continue to fuel the rise of right-wing populism. I would say it in a different way. It'll continue to fuel, or I should say it should be said in a different way, or it should be in a different way, where this should anger just Americans. It shouldn't be about right-wing populism. And it's not about getting a handle on migration. It's getting a handle on illegal migration. This is illegal migration. That's the problem, right? That's what has broken the infrastructure, so to say. And that's what just is unfair to Americans. And what's unfair to a lot of people that go about coming in, migrating the right way. Look at what this illegal migration has done. Now I have certain people that I work with, OG Baywa. I don't know. Y'all may have heard me speak about her. She lives in Nigeria. They shut off Nigerian immigration. Now, whether Trump says that this is because of Christians being killed, and that's just a narrative that he's pushing, because I believe that the last year more Muslims were killed, but Trump just paints a picture in whatever way they need to in order for us to feel that it's okay for us to go in there and save the Christians, the good people, against the evil Muslims in Nigeria. So it leads to a lot of other issues. Her border stance, Hillary Clinton, I'm referring to. She called for secure borders while maintaining they must be managed in a humane way without torture or family separation. Well, maybe she should have said this to Barack Obama. Matter of fact, wasn't she serving at the time when Barack was doing all the putting the kids in cages and all that? And this just goes to show us, like, we need to go back and look at how they flip-flop. I remember with the border when Donald Trump was popular for saying build the wall. This is when I was still not necessarily caught up in the Democratic Party, because I was just not voting at this time. But I did not realize that Barack Obama had called for building a fence or a wall. Joe Biden called for it. I believe Nancy Pelosi even called for it. I believe Nancy Pelosi called for it, but I know Barack and for sure Biden. I've seen videos of him, talking about there needs to be a fence or something built. It's a wall.
But a lot of us didn't know about that. And a lot of people were hating Trump who were voting Barack, voting Biden, voting Hillary, but hating Trump for saying the things that the people that they voted for were saying, but they just didn't pay attention to it because it wasn't a radicalized issue and it wasn't put on mainstream news outlets. So they had no idea. I remember people walking around doing street interviews and it's like, who do you think said this? And they're like, Donald Trump. Yeah, he's an asshole. He's racist. He's this, he's that. And then they find out, well, no, actually, Barack Obama said that. Actually, Joe Biden said that. And they're just sitting there stuck because they don't realize, because a lot of us don't get to see the big picture. So Hillary Clinton, who is she serving? She's serving the same people that every politician outside of Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene are serving. These oligarchs. Across the board, it seems like Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene, it seems like they're the only ones, especially on the conservative side. I'm not as familiar with who on the Democrat side I would feel comfortable saying isn't serving these oligarchs, because it seems like the same thing on their side. It's the same people funding both. So when you have the same people funding you that are funding your quote unquote opposition, and y'all need to put food on the table, y'all going to play whatever role necessary in order to do the bidding of the people that are putting money in your pocket. It's just how it goes. We know this. That's why a lot of us go to work every day for decades, hating what we do, hating life, just because we got to put food on the table. So let's keep it moving. I want to make sure I'm paying attention to the notes and then I'm not over talking. All right. So let's keep it moving. Yeah, that's all I really have to say. I'll finish that up when it comes to the first topic that Nick was discussing about the labor. These migrants that came here illegally during the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration, they wouldn't be here if the oligarchs that control both parties did not want them here. They would not be here. We get confused in all the other dumb stuff. But we have to be clear that when things happen within our government, the group of people, they're happening because there's a group of people that want them to happen. And those are the oligarchs that are making all the moves, that are treating these politicians like pawns, and that are hiring Trump or using Trump as their press secretary to do their bidding, create whatever chaos is necessary at the time. So therefore, we will lean into one political party or another and get confused by where both are leading us. So as things become, and this is why social media is so dope, because in the past, like, our parents really didn't have access to be able to just somebody to put up one video that shows, people just contradicting themselves. They didn't have the ability to go look at a video of Donald Trump and hear the full speech of, instead of just hearing, yeah, there's good people on both sides. Now we have the ability to go on YouTube, listen to the full speech, or look up the full transcript and see, oh yeah, 2 sentences later, he actually said he's not talking about the neo-Nazis and white supremacists, that he condemns them and they should be condemned by all means. So we just have that ability. So we got to lean into it. So let me not stay too much on that topic. I'll touch on Iran briefly, as Nick did. Iran is the same thing. More of the same. I feel like I keep saying this, and more of the same. It's the Kurt Mills type. I referenced Kurt Mills earlier, as Nick mentioned him. It's the Kurt Mills. This is the same thing. People that are going to just agree with whatever Donald Trump is doing. The same people that will be against us going to war with Iran will stand on that. Why? Because Donald Trump was against it. He was the one that said no new wars. Now they just put their allegiance behind Donald Trump and just go with whatever it is that Donald Trump decides. We trust the process when it comes to Donald Trump. Why would you trust any politician? As soon as you trust any politician, you lost all of your leverage. You lost all your leverage. That's like trusting the person selling you the car. Is this the best price? Yeah, this is the best price. I trust you. You lost all leverage. You lost all. It's one of the most ignorant things that you can do. Trust a politician. Makes no sense. All right, so let's. So Nick talked about a bunch of things, and he talked about I'm not sure that he actually got into this, but I was watching an interview that the president of Iran was doing, and we were actually talking about this earlier on the show today, where the president of Iran, he seems like one of the most logical people in politics throughout the world. Now, this may be a bit different than the supreme ruler, the Ayatollah. I understand that. But I'm assuming that the president expressing a lot of these things. Now, the Ayatollah could be telling the president because he may just be operating as the press secretary for Iran. Just being real. So we don't know. But based on the actions that we see aligning with Iran, based on them saying, hey, we're cool with you overseeing our nuclear weapons, but we can't give up our ballistic missiles. I heard Anna Kasparian say, and I got to validate this or verify this, I should say. That we definitely got to confirm it. But she said that Israel bombed 7 countries like in the last few years. So why would, if I'm Iran, would I give up my missiles when there's a hostile enemy? This is the same energy. This is the same things that Bibi Netanyahu says. We need to have these nuclear weapons that they still haven't admitted to having. We need to have missiles. We need American dollars to make sure that we can defend ourselves because we have hostile neighbors. Meanwhile, Israel is the most hostile of them all. So why would Iran give up their weapons when Israel and Bibi Netanyahu have made it very clear for a very long time that they want regime change, they want control when it comes to Iran? So now what's going on? We're going to go in there, as Nick mentioned, we're going to have this attack that seems very likely, and obviously I'm hoping that we don't go to war with them, but it seems pretty imminent at this point. We're sending, our ships, we're sending our air forces over there. And the overall goal seems to not necessarily be regime change, but it seems to be to just weaken them, to bend to our will, to bend a knee and accept whatever it is that we tell them that they're going to accept, to make it more likely, to encourage them, to nudge them a bit like, okay, y'all aren't going to budge. All right, well, watch this. And then we'll see if you're willing to budge. And this seems like the overall play. Think about Iran. What do? They go in there, they cause some sort of chaos. They got the paid activists going around there. They're bullying and putting sanctions on the government. So therefore, when you put sanctions on the government, you're hindering the government from being able to do their job in serving the Iranian people. So the Iranian people, they get upset, and they're also hearing all the propaganda that America's putting out there. So now they're getting pissed off at their government because their government isn't strong enough to deal with America or to provide the best life for the Iranians. So now they have protests. So now here you go. We got Lindsey Graham and other people, what are they? Some of them were wearing like the Make Iran Great Again hats, like, because now they want to support the Iranian people. Yeah, the neoconservatives are now in support of the Iranian people. They just hate the government. You see how all these things change, or how we're manipulating all these different areas. So now what happens? Now when we go to war, we're going to break their will. And we'll be able to get them to agree to whatever deal we decide that they're going to agree with. That's it. They've already agreed to whatever, stipulations they need to when it comes to our nuclear weapons. How can we expect for them to allow their country to be crippled to the point where they can't defend themselves against a neighbor that has already demonstrated that they are hostile towards not only Iran, but to many other countries in that region? How can you be taking yourself seriously? How can you take your government seriously if you're an Iranian and your government agrees to just give up missiles to protect your country? That further weakens the belief in the people, the belief that the people will have in the government representing them, protecting them, giving them everything that we as Americans would want our country to do for us. So let me keep going. We're just seeing how all this stuff plays out. And as Nick started off with the show, it's nothing new. This isn't new news. We're just touching on the same things, maybe just hitting it from different angles and seeing this story play out in real time in front of our eyes. So what can we do about it? Keep speaking on it. Keep waking people up, elevating people's consciousness, and reminding ourselves like, hey, all these things that we just accept when it comes to war, when it comes to killing people, what are we killing for? And who's telling us that it's justified? And whose bidding are we doing this on behalf of? So we need to wake up. We need to unite, right? The same old story. Republicans come together with Democrats. Let's just unite on some common sense, things that just make sense for overall America. If we got in the room without the chaos of the politicians trying to divide us, I'm pretty sure we could figure this thing out. I'm pretty sure we can agree on 95% of things that are going to move America into a better place and elevate the consciousness and frequency of America, because we won't be hating each other. And when we're not hating each other, we can't be distracted enough to be complicit in a lot of the things that our country supports and backs, especially when it comes to Israel and other things that are being done, not only in that region, but around the world as well. So that's what I'll leave y'all with. As always, appreciate y'all. Y'all let me know where my bias may be coming in and creating some blind spots for me. Do me a favor, continue to like the Black Guy in the Corner page. We're building that up. So I want to be able to have two, just in case, just to be able to provide more and more content. Hopefully make that page more specific to certain things and just be able to grow. So appreciate y'all as always. Like, subscribe, turn your notifications on. Word to Big Bro Robert, who always reminds us to control the algorithm and not let the algorithm control us. And on that note, I'll see y'all soon.
TBGITC. It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a nigga on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there. Let's figure out a split that's honorable and fair. Tell me where you trying to take it. Bro, I'll meet you there. 1600 Penn, Wash, DC. Swear I saw the vision riding through the DMV. I envision prayers, but I could do VP. Hillbilly elegy, fuck, I look like JD. Shout out my cheat code, Dave and Karen raised me. And my big bro, a nuclear family.
And they don't like that. Strong fathers in the crib, BLM fought that. LBJ society created all that. Victimhood mentality, I can't embrace that. And everything they taught in school, assume it's all cap. Everything I said I'd be, I am that. Everything I said I'd be, I am that. Everything I said I'd be, I am that. Ain't no introduction, just some fun facts. In case you were wondering, I am that.
I know you heard me hit it 3 times for Dr. Umar. Shout out to Umar, man. We ain't kicking nobody when they down. And shout out to everybody that continues to show love, support, appreciating the message that I'm giving y'all, along with the bro Nick's message. We gonna keep pushing, man. And shout out to the haters too, cause y'all in the comments heavy too. y'all the ones that gave me the inspiration to create this song. They kept saying like, who's the random black guy in the corner? I am.